How's everybody doing? A guten Erev Shabbos to you. Great to be learning with you on a Friday, Yom Shishi. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Friday? Yehudit in South Carolina, wishing everyone a restful and rejuvenating Shabbos. Stephen in New Hampshire, Nancy in still at work. Bill in mid-Missouri, Bella in Florida, Shandora in the Bronx, Yitzhak in Minnesota, Gordo in Scotland, Joe in the Inland Empire. Ella says shalom, Aoife in Florida. Welcome everybody. Just a single daf today because we are caught up. Today we're doing Daf Yud Beis, page 12 here in Tractate Kiddushin, the 20th volume of the Talmud. We are continuing our discussion of Mishna number 1 in chapter 1. How is a woman betrothed to a man? 3 possibilities: money or its equivalent, a document, or sexual intercourse to create the betrothal. Yesterday we were discussing, does the sexual intercourse, if it's used to create betrothal, also create marriage at the same time? That question was never resolved. But we're always a little bit uncomfortable with this idea. Are they really going to use sexual intercourse to create betrothal? Right? Like that seems like we should wait for marriage to do that. So while it is a valid means to create betrothal, we shall see today that the sages were, so to speak, against it. They were against it, very much against it. And the much more appropriate way to create betrothal is either some exchange of money or its equivalent, or creating the document of betrothal. Of course, at all times, this is done with witnesses and with the intent to create betrothal. And since you have to have witnesses to create the betrothal, you can see why sexual intercourse to create betrothal would be problematic. Let's get into it. We pick this up at the bottom of page 11b. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says the reasoning of Beis Shammai, that the minimum amount, we were talking about this at the end of yesterday's daf, now we're getting back to using money to create the betrothal, but what is the minimum amount? Beis Shammai say a dinar, a silver dinar. Beis Hillel say a peruta, a copper peruta, a very small amount of money, the smallest coin that there is. Beis Hillel evidently is saying, well, you're using money to create the betrothal. Okay, it's symbolic anyway. It's not like you're actually purchasing the wife for this money. It's a transfer that has to use actual money. So it must be that the minimum amount of money, the smallest coin there is the minimum that can be used to create the betrothal. Beis Shammai say no. For the sake of the dignity of Jewish women, you can't use the very smallest coin to create betrothal. We're going to use the silver dinar, which is a much more substantial coin. So Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says the reasoning of Beis Shammai that the minimum amount with which a woman can be betrothed is 1 dinar, and that this is in accordance with the opinion of Chizkiah, as Chizkiah says that the verse says with regard to a Hebrew maidservant, then he shall let her be redeemed. This is Exodus 21:8, which teaches that she can deduct an amount from the price of her redemption and leave before her time of slavery is complete. In other words, if the Hebrew maidservant was purchased for a certain price, this is slavery when slavery existed, although this is not permanent slavery, it's much more like an indentured servant. At any rate, there was a purchase price to make her an indentured servant so she can get out of that servitude by paying what it cost to put her into it. But we make a deduction for the number of years that she has served. She has already performed work, so she can deduct that from the redemption price. So this teaches that she can deduct an amount from the price of her redemption and leave before her time of slavery is complete. So if she comes into possession of money, she can pay the master for her value, less the work that she has already performed. Beis Shammai derived the laws of regular betrothal from the case of a Hebrew maidservant, as will be explained below. Now, granted, if you say that when she was acquired, he gave her at least 1 dinar, so this is the meaning of the statement that she may continually deduct from that amount up to 1 peruta. But if you say that he gave her 1 peruta when he purchased her as a maidservant, can she deduct from 1 peruta? 1 peruta is already the smallest coin that there is. So the Gemara rejects this argument, right? In other words, they're saying that we're gonna learn something about the laws of betrothal and the minimum amount of money that can be used to create betrothal via money from the laws of purchasing a Hebrew maidservant. The Hebrew maidservant has to be purchased for a price such that if she's going to leave early by paying what she was, by deducting from the purchase price the amount of work she's already done, meaning the time that she's already served. So you have to have a purchase price that enables her to reduce the amount. If she was purchased for the minimum coin that there is, there's no possibility of deducting from that. So Beis Shammai is saying, likewise, since both of these cases have an exchange of money for a person, as it were. So just like the Hebrew maidservant has to have a purchase price that's higher than the minimum amount so that we can, reduce it by the amount of time served. Likewise, when a woman is betrothed, even though she's not being acquired, she's not being purchased for money, money is being used as the means of creating betrothal. Nevertheless, we have to have a larger amount of money because these two cases are related. That's the argument that's being made. Right? So, but if you say that he gave her 1 peruta, the maidservant, when he purchased her as a female slave, so can she deduct from 1 peruta? 1 peruta is already the smallest coin there is. But the Gemara rejects this argument. But perhaps this is what the merciful one is saying. In a case where he gave her 1 dinar, she deducts from that amount up to 1 peruta. In a case where he gave her 1 peruta, she cannot deduct at all. So if he paid 1 peruta for her, the option of redemption does not apply. I mean, that seems crazy. You're going to say that because she was purchased for such a small price, once she has served some time and she wants to get out of the remaining years of servitude, and so she offers to pay the full amount, which in this case was only a penny, but because it can't be deducted from the full price, she doesn't have the option to redeem herself? That doesn't seem right. Now we're on 12a, and in fact, the Gemara rejects this suggestion. No, this cannot enter your mind, as the law of deduction must be similar to the law of designation. What is designation? This is the process by which a master who owns a Hebrew maidservant designates her to become his wife or the wife of his son. Now, because she's going to become a wife rather than a maidservant, presumably she has to consent to this. But at any rate, there's this possibility. When slavery existed, if a Jew purchased a Canaanite slave, he didn't have the option to marry her. But if he purchased a Hebrew maidservant, who would only serve for 6 years in any case, but during that period, he had the option to upgrade her, as it were, to a wife if she consented for himself or for his son. And this was called designation. So just as with designation, although the law is that if he desires, he may designate her, and if he does not desire, he is not required to designate her. Nevertheless, anywhere that he cannot designate her, for example, in a case where they are related, and she is therefore forbidden to him, right? Maybe it was his cousin or his aunt or his niece or something who he's not permitted to marry. So in this case, her sale is not a valid sale. So too here, with regard to her redemption, anywhere that she cannot deduct an amount from her purchase price, her sale is not a valid sale. In other words, if the amount was so small that she couldn't deduct from it later, then she was never sold into slavery at all because the minimum price was not met. Now, the Gemara notes, and according to the opinion of Beis Shammai, the mode of betrothal of a woman by money is derived from the case of a Hebrew maidservant as follows. Just as a Hebrew maidservant cannot be acquired with one peruta, so too a woman cannot be betrothed with one peruta. That's Beis Shammai's argument. Now, you could go through this whole analysis and derivation of that law, or you could just say that Beis Shammai say, for the dignity of women, one peruta is too small. You have to use a dinar just for the sake of their dignity. Or you can make this whole argument, no, we're going to compare this law to the law of the Hebrew maidservant. There's a minimum for the Hebrew maidservant so that she has the possibility of deduction for the years served, and therefore cannot be the smallest coin. And likewise, betrothal cannot be done with the smallest coin. At any rate, this is only to help us understand and derive or prove the minority opinion of Beis Shammai that betrothal requires at least a dinar, which is a much larger coin than a peruta. So let's continue. So the Gemara asks, even if Beis Shammai derive their opinion in this manner, using this comparison to the law of the Hebrew maidservant, how does this prove that a woman can be betrothed only with a minimum of 1 dinar? But why not say that she can be betrothed with half a dinar? Or say that she can be betrothed with 2 perutas, as it is possible to fulfill the redemption of a Hebrew maidservant if her sale was for either of these amounts. In other words, okay, the minimum can't be 1 peruta for the reason of the argument that you just made. But why upgrade the minimum amount all the way to a silver dinar, which is a much larger amount than a peruta? There are many denominations of coins in between a peruta and a silver dinar. So why would we go all the way to the silver dinar? How do we know that that's the minimum amount, even according to Beis Shammai? And the Gemara answers, since this comparison excludes betrothal with 1 peruta, as it indicates that a woman can be betrothed only with money of significant value, so the sages established the minimum amount at 1 dinar, because that is a coin of substantial value. Once they had to get off 1 peruta as the minimum, okay, so then they had a choice what coin they were going to use, and they chose a coin which they consider significant enough for the situation. So Rava said a different explanation. This is the reasoning of Beis Shammai, who hold that a woman can be betrothed only with a minimum of 1 dinar. Why? So the daughters of Israel should not be treated like ownerless property. Allowing women to be betrothed with such a small amount as 1 peruta is disrespectful to them, right? They didn't go with, that whole argument. Rather, according to Rava, Beis Shammai simply said it for the sake of the dignity of Jewish women. New subject. The Mishnah teaches that Beis Hillel say that a woman can be betrothed with 1 peruta or with any item that is worth 1 peruta, and that is the law. 1 peruta, okay, and that is the law. So Rav Yosef thought to say 1 peruta means any amount. There is no defined value, as a woman may be betrothed with 1 peruta regardless of its value at the time. If you're going to say 1 peruta or the equivalent of 1 peruta, well, what's 1 peruta worth? Okay, it's the smallest coin. But what is it worth? We know, right, in modern times it's very obvious to us because you open your phone or the newspaper and you see the value of money is fluctuating all the time with respect to other currencies and commodities. So how much is 1 peruta really worth? And Abaye said to him, but isn't it taught with regard to this in the Mishnah itself? How much is 1 peruta? It is 1/8 of the Italian Isar. And this shows that there is a defined value for 1 peruta. And if you would say, well, this statement only applies in the generation of Moses, meaning this was the value of 1 peruta in the time of the Torah. But now, at any later time, its value is determined by that which people consider to be 1 peruta. So that claim cannot be correct. As when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, from the land of Israel, he said, Rabbi Simai estimated in his generation, how much is one peruta? It is 1/8 of the Italian Issar. And when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he said that Rabbi Dostai and Rabbi Yanai and Rabbi Oshaya estimated, how much is one peruta? It is 1/6 of the Italian Issar. So you see, the value of one peruta keeps changing over time as currencies in the world change their values over time. So Rav Yosef said to Abaye, if so, then this is in conflict with that which we learned in a Baraisa. Go and calculate how many perutas, there are in 2 sela. More than 2,000. Now, there are not even 2,000, and you call them more than 2,000? Rather, the peruta is certainly worth less than 1/8 of the Italian Issar. A certain old man said to them, I teach this Baraisa as saying close to 2,000. And the Gemara asks, ultimately, according to the calculation of 1/8 of an Issar, the number of perutas in 2 sela is 1,536, which is nowhere near 2,000. And the Gemara answers, since it passes half of the second thousand, it is called close to 2,000. Now the Gemara discusses the matter itself. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he said, Rabbi Simai estimated in his generation, how much is one peruta? It is 1/8 of the Italian Issar. And when Ravin came and said that Rabbi Dostai and Rabbi Yana and Rabbi Oshai estimated how much is one peruta, they said it is 1/6 of the Italian Issar. And Abaye said to Rav Dimi, shall we say that you and Ravin disagree with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between these other 2 Tanaim, as it is taught in a Baraisa? The peruta mentioned by the sages is 1/8 of the Italian Issar. 6 silver ma'a are 1 dinar, and 1 ma is worth 2 pundion, and in a pundion there are 2 Issar, and an Issar is 2 masmas. A masmas is worth 2 kontarank, and a kontarank is worth 2 perutas. By this calculation, one finds that 1 peruta is 1/8 of the Italian Issar. Are you tracking the mathematics? Don't worry about it. If you ever need to know the relative values of money in Talmudic times, this is your home address for that, page 12a in Tractate Kiddushin. If that's not a particular interest of yours, then just listen and enjoy. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says this is not the case. Rather, there are 3 hadres to a ma, and 2 henets to a hadres, 2 shaman to a henets, and 2 perutas to a shaman. Consequently, one finds that 1 peruta is 1/6 of the Italian Issar. Shall we say that one master agrees with the first Tana, and Ravin, who said his ruling in the name of Rabbi Dosta and Rabbi Yana and Rabbi Shaya, agrees with Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel? Rav Dimi said to Abaye, both my statement and that of Ravin are in accordance with the opinion of the first Tana, and it is not difficult. This statement of mine is referring to when the Issar increased in value in relation to silver coins, and this statement of Ravin is referring to when the Issar decreased in value. The Gemara elaborates, when the Issar increased in value, 24 Issar stood at 1 dinar. When they decreased in value, 32 Issar stood at 1 dinar. If so, there is a set ratio between the value of a peruta and the value of silver, and there are 192 perutas in 1 dinar. By contrast, the ratio between the value of a copper Issar and a silver dinars fluctuates, so that sometimes an Issar will be worth 8 perutas, while at other times it is worth only 6. New subject. Shmuel says, if a man betrothed a woman with a date, and I don't mean they went on a date to a local restaurant, rather a date from a date palm, right? So if he betrothed a woman with 1 little piece of fruit, a date, she is betrothed, even if a core of dates is worth 1 dinar, which would mean that 1 date is worth much less than 1 peruta. Well, we've said that the minimum amount, even according to Beis Hillel, which is the law, with which a man can betroth a woman, is 1 peruta, or some object which is the equivalent of 1 peruta. So if you're going to say that 1 date is worth much less than 1 peruta, how could a valid betrothal possibly be created? That's the question being asked. And the reason is that although a date has little value here, we are concerned that perhaps it is worth one peruta in Medea or in some other distant place where dates are expensive. Therefore, she is betrothed in this location as well. The Gemara asks, but didn't we learn in the Mishna that Beis Hillel say with one peruta or with an item worth one peruta, but not less? And the Gemara explains this is not difficult. This statement in the Mishnah is referring to a betrothal whose status is certain. Betrothal with one peruta or an item worth one peruta creates a betrothal that is certainly valid. We know betrothal was created. Conversely, this case stated by Shmuel is referring to a betrothal whose status is uncertain. Although the item is not worth one peruta here, there is a concern that the betrothal might nevertheless be valid. If this couple wants to move forward, right, to marriage, they might have to do the betrothal again. The concern is that they said, well, you know what, we did it with something worth less than a peruta. We were just messing around. No betrothal was created. They go their separate ways. She goes and marries someone else. But she has an uncertain betrothal in her past, and they didn't create a bill of divorce to make sure that it was broken off. Terrible situation. Now her second marriage might be a non-marriage that in fact is an adulterous union, and if they have children by that second non-marriage, those children would be mamzers, which is a terrible, terrible outcome. So an uncertain betrothal is something we want to avoid at all costs. If an uncertain betrothal was created, we need to either create a certain betrothal to supplant it or create a divorce to make sure it was broken off. Where am I? So the Gemara relates, there was a certain man who betrothed a woman with a bundle of rags. And Rav Shimi bar Chiya sat before Rav and examined the bundle to see if it had the value of one peruta. If it was worth one peruta, yes, she was betrothed. And if not, no, she was not betrothed. So the Gemara asks, and if it does not have the value of one peruta, is she not betrothed? But didn't Shmuel say that we are concerned that the item might be worth one peruta somewhere else, like in Medea? So the Gemara explains this is not difficult. This ruling of Rav Shimi bar Chiya is referring to betrothal whose status is certain, whereas this statement of Shmuel is referring to betrothal whose status is uncertain. And the Gemara further relates, there was a certain man who betrothed a woman with a blue marble stone. A blue marble stone. Rashi explains that this was a black stone. Other commentaries state that it was a semi-precious stone, but not a jewel of a blue-black hue. So let's just call it a blue marble for now. Rav Chisda sat and estimated whether it was worth one peruta. If it was worth one peruta, yes, she was betrothed. And if not, no, she was not betrothed. And the Gemara asks, and if it does not have the value of one peruta, is she not betrothed? But didn't Shmuel say that we're concerned that the item might be worth one peruta in some other location, like Medea? So the Gemara answers, Rav Chisda does not hold in accordance with that opinion of Shmuel, as he holds that if the item is not worth one peruta in the place where the betrothal occurred, then there is no betrothal. Now the mother of the man who offered the betrothal said to Rav Chisda, but on the day that he betrothed her with the blue marble, it was worth one peruta. And he said to the mother, it is not in your power to render her forbidden to a later man. If another comes and betroths her, his betrothal is not dismissed due to this earlier act. Since the blue marble, is not worth one peruta now, the betrothal of the second man may be valid. Now we're on 12b. Rav Chisda explained, well, is this not similar to the case of Yehudis, the wife of Rabbi Chiya, who would have painful childbirths, and therefore she wished to leave Rabbi Chiya? She said to Rabbi Chiya, my mother told me when you were young, my mother said to me, right? So Rabbi Chiya's wife is saying that my mother said to me when I was young, when I was young, my father accepted betrothal on my behalf from another man, which would render Yehudis forbidden to Rabbi Chia. He said to her, "It is not in your mother's power to render you forbidden to me, as this testimony is insufficient." If somebody comes forward and says, yeah, way back when, years ago, before we were betrothed, there was another betrothal, but no one else knows about it, no one else has heard about it, there's no other witnesses. Well, we know that one witness is not enough to establish a matter, so her mom's story is insufficient to change the present reality. Returning to the incident with the blue marble, the Gemara relates that the sages said to Rav Chisda, "Why do you say that she is not betrothed because the item is not worth one peruta in the place where the betrothal occurred? After all, there are witnesses in Edit who know that on that day it had the value of one peruta." Rav Chisda said to them, well, now, in any event, those witnesses are not here, and therefore their potential testimony is disregarded. There might be witnesses, they might exist, they might come forward at some future time, but they're not here now, so we're not going to change the matter. Rav Chisda cites a proof for his statement. Isn't this the same as the opinion of Rabbi Hanina? In the case of a woman who appeared before the court and said that she was taken captive but remained undefiled, if there are no witnesses that she was captured, her entire claim must be accepted, and therefore she is permitted to her husband, right? What's going on there? First of all, she didn't have to say anything. If she said nothing, then she's married to her husband and the marriage goes on as before. If it comes out that she was taken captive and held by Gentiles, then there's a concern that she was raped while she was taken captive. So if there were witnesses to her going into captivity, then there's going to have to be an investigation to see whether she was raped or not. But since by her own testimony alone do we learn that she was captured, then, the mouth that prohibits is the mouth that permits. In other words, she didn't have to say anything. She said she was taken into captivity, but since it is her testimony that says that, then we're also going to believe her testimony when she says, "And while I was a captive, I was not raped." Why does this matter? Like, a woman who is raped does not become prohibited to her husband unless her husband is a priest. That's the problem. If her husband is a priest, then even though she did nothing wrong, the fact that she was raped becomes a problem because he can no longer serve as a priest if he remains married to her. Okay. So going back to this case of Rabbi Hanina, in the case of a woman who appeared before the court and said that she was taken captive but remained undefiled, if there are no witnesses that she was captured, her entire claim must be accepted, and therefore she is permitted to her husband. Although there are witnesses elsewhere who can testify that she was taken captive, and consequently the court need not rely on her statement alone, as Rabbi Hanina says, when her witnesses are far away in the north, will she become forbidden to her husband? Well, if the witnesses come here, then we can talk about it. But the witnesses aren't here. We're not going to make a ruling based on the fact that some witnesses might appear at a future date. And the Gemara comments, Abaye and Rava do not hold in accordance with this statement of Rav Chisda with regard to betrothal. In their opinion, one cannot learn the law here from Rabbi Hanina's statement in the case of the captive, as there is a difference between the cases. If, in the case of Rabbi Hanina, the sages were lenient with regard to a captive woman who makes herself appear repulsive before her captor so that he will not rape her, and it is therefore believable that she was not violated, shall we also be lenient with regard to the serious prohibition of a married woman? In other words, this other case that we started talking about, where it might be that there was a betrothal before the betrothal that led to the second marriage, which would mean that the second marriage was not a marriage and the kids are mamzers. This is not the same situation as that case of the captive woman. There was a good reason to be lenient. Here, there's a good reason to be stringent. So the Gemara reports, descendants of the family of the woman who was betrothed with the blue marble remained in Surah, as after Rav Chisda ruled that the woman's first betrothal was invalid, she did marry another man and she had children. But the sages avoided the family and refused to marry into it due to the concern that it was founded on a possibly adulterous relationship, which would render the descendants of the family mamzers. And the Gemara comments, and it was not because they maintained, in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel, that there was concern that any item might be worth one peruta somewhere else. Rather, it was because they held in accordance with the opinion of Abaye and Rava, who said, since there are witnesses in a different place, one must take them into account, right? So they didn't break up the marriage, they didn't declare that those children are mamzers, but the sages themselves avoided marrying into that family just because there was the whiff of the possibility that the second marriage was not a valid marriage. New subject. The Gemara relates there was a certain man who betrothed a woman with a myrtle branch in the marketplace. What did he do? So first of all, he used an item of low value. Is it worth a peruta? Maybe, maybe not. But what he also did is that he created that betrothal with the woman in the marketplace, outside, on the street corner. That is not the proper way to enter betrothal, which leads to marriage. It is undignified. Rav Acha Bar Huna sent this dilemma before Rav Yosef. In a case like this, what is the law? This betrothal created with a myrtle branch as the item that is given to the woman and in the venue of the marketplace. Rav Yosef sent a response to him. Flog that man in accordance with the opinion of Rav and require her to receive a bill of divorce in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel in case the myrtle branch is worth one peruta somewhere else. Right? So the betrothal might be valid, and therefore, we need to force them to have a divorce, right? Because we can't have people creating betrothal, A, with an item of such a low value, but B, the bigger deal, in such an undignified manner as creating betrothal in the marketplace. And the Gemara explains that Rav would flog a man for betrothing a woman in the marketplace because this is disrespectful and crude. And for betrothing a woman, or in a different case, he would also flog a man for betrothing a woman through sexual intercourse, as it is unsavory to invite witnesses to observe a man and a woman enter a room to engage in intercourse. And he would also flog a man for betrothing a woman without an arrangement, without shidduch, i.e., if he did not discuss betrothal with the woman before betrothing her. Each of these cases, each of these acts is considered indecent behavior. Now, right there, I was talking about this a couple days ago, or maybe it was yesterday, right? Right there's that difference between how the sages acted in the real world and when they were discussing hypothetical cases in the study hall. Of course, sexual intercourse is a valid method for creating betrothal according to Torah law. It's technically specified in the Torah. It is possible to create betrothal in that manner. But as Rabbi Aaron says, the Torah, its principles are true and will remain true forever. But some of the legal, mechanisms for creating situations that made sense when the Torah was given 3,300 years ago no longer make sense as civilization advances, right? And so that's why we have sages in every generation who make rulings and tell us, has the law changed in some regard in order to preserve the spirit of the law, right? So the spirit of the law says that betrothal, which the sages call Kiddushin, consecration of the woman, right? That the man and the woman enter into a holy state where they become prohibited to everyone else, and now they're about to go to the next stage, which is marriage and create children. This is a holy and beautiful thing, and we don't do it in a casual, willy-nilly, unsavory manner. Therefore, sexual intercourse might be a legally valid method for creating betrothal under Torah law, but by rabbinic decree, no, you don't do that. And if you violate a rabbinic decree, you're liable to be flogged for violating that decree. And creating betrothal by sexual intercourse is a flogging offense, a floggable offense. And likewise, right? Where am I? And likewise, Rav would also flog a man for nullifying a get, a bill of divorce, that he has already sent to his wife, and for issuing a declaration preemptively invalidating a get. The latter case is referring to a man who announces before giving a get that he is divorcing his wife against his will, thereby rendering the document ineffective. This is very dangerous behavior because it might lead to a grave sin if the wife remarries another man under the mistaken impression that she received a valid get. And similarly, Rav would flog anyone for tormenting a messenger of the sages, as this indicates a lack of regard for the sages. And Rav would flog one who had an excommunication take effect on him for 30 days and yet does not repent or appeal to the sages to annul his censure. And Rav would flog a son-in-law who lives in his father-in-law's house, as there is concern that he might sin with his mother-in-law. That's a crazy family. But the concern exists, and the Gemara comments. This indicates that with regard to one who lives in his father-in-law's house permanently, yes, he is flogged. Whereas with regard to one who only passes by his father-in-law's house, no, he is not flogged. Right? So, so a couple, a young married couple, can go and visit her parents, right, and stay in her parents' house while they're visiting. But the sages are strongly advising against, and Rav himself would actually flog someone for doing this. You should not have a couple living in her parents' house, right? So remember All in the Family, right? Mike and Gloria were living in Archie and Edith's house, right? Archie and Edith were Gloria's parents. So that would be an arrangement that violates rabbinic law, because there's a concern that Mike and Edith, okay. But there was a certain son-in-law who passed by the entrance of his father-in-law's house, didn't even, go in and stay there, just passed by the entrance. And Rav Sheshes flogged him due to licentiousness. What, just for walking in front of his mother-in-law's house? Why? And the Gemara explains, in that case, there were already suspicions about him and his mother-in-law, i.e., about rumors of intimacy between them. So in walking by the house, he contributed to these rumors, which is why he was flogged. And what is the law on that? One who betroths a woman through intercourse, or who betroths a woman in the market, or who betroths a woman without a prior arrangement, is punished with lashes of rebelliousness, in accordance with the opinion of Rav. Some authorities say that these lashes are administered only to one who betroths a woman through intercourse, in accordance with the opinion of the sages of Nehardea. And in this particular case of the son-in-law who walked past his mother-in-law's house and got whipped for it, if one has been accused of engaging in a forbidden sexual relationship, or if a rumor spread about him and a certain woman, they should not live in the same courtyard and should not be seen together in the same neighborhood. And the Ravad writes that this law applies only to a mother-in-law, as the son-in-law is familiar with her due to her daughter. It does not apply to other forbidden relationships. We're not concerned that a brother and sister, could live in the same courtyard because they might be getting it on. We're not concerned about that. But between a son-in-law and his mother-in-law, I guess maybe that made more sense in ancient times, because a man might become engaged to a woman when she was very young, just through betrothal, and she's actually waiting for her to grow up. But her parents are much closer in age to him, right? So his mother-in-law might actually be a woman who's close to his age, and now you can see where the concern might become more of a thing. Now, the sages of Nehardea say Rav would flog a violator in all of the cases listed, but he would the sages of Nehardea say Rav would not flog a violator in all of those cases listed, but he would in fact flog a man for betrothing a woman through sexual intercourse without a prior arrangement. And there are those who say even if there was an arrangement beforehand, he would also flog a man for betrothing a woman via intercourse due to licentiousness, as it is indecent to have witnesses observe a man and a woman enter a room in order to engage in intercourse. New subject. The Gemara relates there was a certain man who betrothed a woman with a mat of myrtle branches. People who were present said to him, but it is not worth a peruta. And he said to them, well, if so, let her be betrothed with the 4 dinars that are wrapped in the mat. And the woman took the mat and was silent. Okay, so the man gave this woman, in order to create betrothal, what looked like a rolled up mat. And if that was the object that he was using to betroth her, it was not worth 1 peruta, it would not create betrothal. Inside the mat, there were actually 4 silver dinars. So for sure, this bundle had more than enough value to create betrothal. But the question is, what if the woman who's being betrothed didn't know that the coins were inside? She thought that she was being betrothed with just the mat, which was an item that is not worth enough money. When she finds out that the silver dinars are inside, she doesn't say anything like, oh, okay, now I see what you were doing. I accept betrothal. Rather, she said nothing. So did she actually accept the betrothal on the terms that it was in fact offered? Or did she not accept that betrothal and no betrothal was created? That's what's being asked. So Rava said, her silence, this is silence after the money is given. And any silence after the money is given is nothing, since it was assumed at the time that he gave her an item worth less than 1 peruta, in which case she figured she was not betrothed. So then there is no proof that she acted in accordance with his subsequent statement that, well, I gave you 4 dinars that were inside the mat, and she didn't say anything. So it is possible that she ignored him, and she did not intend to become betrothed with the 4 dinars when she became aware of them. And Rava adds, from where do I state this opinion that no betrothal was created because her silence after the money was given does not indicate consent to the betrothal? From where do I state this opinion, says Rava? As it is taught in a baraisa in a case where a man said to a woman, take this sela as a deposit, and he subsequently went back and said to her, be betrothed to me with it. If he said this at the time the money was given, she is betrothed, if she consented. In a case where he said this after the money was given, then if she wanted to be betrothed in this manner, she is betrothed, but if she did not want it, she is not betrothed. And the Gemara inquires, what is the meaning of she wanted and what is the meaning of she did not want? If we say that she wanted means that she said yes, she wishes to be betrothed, and she did not want means that she explicitly said no, so then one can learn by inference that in the first clause of the baraisa, when he spoke as he gave her the money, and no difference is suggested between her wanting or not wanting, that if she said no, it would also be a betrothal. But why should that be the case? After all, she said no. Rather, is it not to be explained in the following manner? The phrase she wanted means she said yes, and the phrase she did not want means that she remained silent. And one can learn from this that silence after the money is given does not equal consent. Her silence is not interpreted as an agreement to the betrothal. Now we're on page 13a, and I am very close to done. Questions or comments, please get them in. In the city of Pum-Nahara, they raised a difficulty against Rava's proof in the name of Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua. Are these two cases comparable? There in the baraisa, he gave her the money as a deposit, but they are his, right? He gave her money as a deposit. He didn't say, take this money to become betrothed with it. He said, take this money and hold on to it for me. Or take this money as a deposit toward betrothal that will create later, right? What kind of deposit was being created is unclear, but she took the money not for the purpose of creating betrothal. Now that she's holding his money, later he says, you know what, take that money that I deposited with you and accept it as my betrothal money and let us become betrothed. And she agrees. So if she agrees explicitly, yes. If she says nothing, very problematic, right? So now what's going on here? In the name of Rav Huna, in the name of Rav Yehoshua, is it comparable? There in the baraisa, he gave her the money as a deposit, but the money is his. So she therefore thinks, if I throw this money, these coins, and they break, I will be obligated to pay for them, as would anyone who destroys another person's property. Consequently, her silence is interpreted as consent only to continue her role as the person holding the deposit, not to become betrothed with it. By contrast, here he gives the money to her as betrothal money so that they would belong to her. And if it is so that she is not amenable to being betrothed, let her throw the money away. Rav Achai refutes this argument. Is that to say that all women are learned in the law of betrothal? In this case also, she might be thinking, if I throw the money and they break, I will be responsible for them. Therefore, I will not throw them. One cannot deduce from the fact that she does not throw the coins that she has accepted them as betrothal money. Rav Achabar Rav sent this question to Ravina. In a case like this, what is the law? And Ravina sent the following response. We did not hear this statement of Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua. Therefore, we do not need to take it into consideration. You who heard it should be concerned about a possible betrothal. As in all the cases we've discussed, if a couple wishes to create betrothal, please be clear about it. Use money that is well beyond the minimum amount. Say, with this money that I'm giving you in front of witnesses, I wish to create betrothal. Do you consent to betrothal when you accept the money? And she says, yes, I take this money in order to create betrothal. Then everybody knows they are betrothed. But the sages must discuss all these other cases because the couple might not have done that. And then we're not sure betrothal was created. And we need to know, was betrothal created? Because that has far-reaching ramifications for this couple. Or if they break up the betrothal without a get, then, she remarries thinking there never was a betrothal. Huge problem because her second marriage is founded on a non-basis and her children would be mamzers. Okay, let's go to take some questions and comments on Kiddushin 12. What meaning, Michelle asks, what meaning or significance does the myrtle tree have in Torah and Tanakh? Well, here it has no meaning other than that it just happened to have been done with that myrtle branch. But on Sukkot, on the holiday of Sukkot, and some would say Sukkot, then the myrtle is one of the 4 species that we use, when we wave them, which is a halacha, a law, a legal obligation for Jews to do on the holiday of Sukkot, to wave the myrtle, the willow, the palm, and the fruit called the etrog together, take them together, say a blessing, and wave them in the 6 directions, north, south, east, north, south, west, up, down, to sort of indicate, our gratitude to God for everything that is in the world. So the myrtle has a very, beautiful and important significance on that holiday. I don't know that the myrtle branch is used at any other time. I can't think of another example of that. And that's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night, Saturday night, after Shabbos ends. It's getting a little bit earlier every week, so I'll try to get on the air by 9 o'clock Pacific tomorrow night for us to do Kiddushin page 13. Have a beautiful, rejuvenating, enjoyable Shabbos. And before we leave, I'll give you a shofar blast because we're in the month of Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah, when we blast the shofar every day.